With Chinese esports cresting at an all-time global high, we have to wonder, where does Overwatch fit in that picture? If we look at some of the more recent events that Chinese esports has been kind of dominating in, we have to start with some of the most impressive, being RNG's victory at the Mid-Season Invitational in League of Legends. This is an incredible feat as RNG overtook Kingzone Dragon X in the final. I believe it was 3-1. Uzi I taking home his first title, his first international title in incredible fashion with a team that was, argued to actually be, winning this event, which isn't normal when you look at the history of League of Legends. You have some bullish Chinese enthusiasts, but overall, I think everybody has a safe bet on Korea, and they're starting to kind of shift that paradigm in that specific scene. And then you look at China's dominance in Dota 2, with PSG LGD winning their Dota 2 major very recently. When I look at Dota 2 history, and I'm not incredibly well versed in that, I see a lot of Chinese names, and I know that China is incredibly good. I believe they've won multiple internationals, and I'm sure they'll continue to be some of the best Dota players in the globe. And then you look at Tai Lu actually in CS:GO finishing with a respectable fourth place at IEM Sydney over a lot of people's odds. CS:GO apparently, from my understanding, isn't the most popular game in China, but they still managed to do really well. And then we look at Overwatch, and we look at contenders China, and we look at LGD going 2-3 against Lucky Future Zenith, and still showing that China still has a fighting chance against some of the kind of lower tier, but still very respectable Korean teams that are participating over there. The one team that's participating over there in Lucky Future Zenith, which is comprised of some of the former Ardent and Mighty AOD players, kind of in a mix that have been quite good. And LGD taking quite a few games and drawing them to game 5 is something to be applauded. But what isn't necessarily applauded or should be applauded is the fact that Shanghai has kind of single-handedly really gutted the Chinese scene in terms of what I'm hearing from people who are a little bit more on the pulse of what Chinese fans are saying. And it's usually nothing great, with the kind of serial mismanagement and with the more and more information that they're kind of showing us, with 12-hour days, 6 days a week. It's kind of scorned the Chinese fans, and they feel out of touch with the sole representative of the Chinese region in the Overwatch League. It's difficult to cheer for a team that's very possibly going to be going for a winless season in the first season of the Overwatch League. They could very well be going 0-40. Whether or not you agree with that sentiment, it's still very possible, and it is a very possible threat for the Chinese scene when you have the sole representative being the clearly worst team in the first season of the Overwatch League. It guts the scene. You have to wonder how that affects the Overwatch ecosystem in China, and it can't be in a good state. But that being said, if we look historically at China, their place among esports is usually at the top. When we look at Warcraft 3 with players like Sky and Infi, two incredibly great human players, some of the best. I believe that Sky is probably up there with names like Grubby and Todd as some of the best players to ever play the game, and world renowned. And when we look at League of Legends emergence in roughly what was season 2 and has continued onwards and being a very, very strong and competitive region against Korea. I believe they won an MSI not too long ago, and they won this year's MSI as well. So it kind of begs the question of where exactly Overwatch fits in this kind of global Chinese esports picture. And I believe it's going to kind of bounce back, and I think it will reach the top in this scene as well. But I think that Shanghai's performance so far has not been amazing, and I think has stunted the growth of Chinese Overwatch, definitely. When we look at a team like Miraculous Youngster coming into what was the first season of the Overwatch League, and the fact that they weren't picked up, or maybe they necessarily weren't of age. The fact that they kind of had to split apart due to the fact that it wasn't really feasible to remain together, and it wasn't really worth the time, it felt like, it is kind of a travesty, because I think that they would have been an amazing representative for this team, for this region, I should say, especially with only one slot. But that kind of opens up the discussion for what season 2 of the Overwatch League looks like. If you look at the kind of trends that China's going for, or the kind of news that's coming out of China with the emergence of what are kind of being dubbed esports cities. There's a town in East China where Tencent, which is the parent company of many different applications, or Chinese applications like WeChat, and I believe there's an application called QQ, which obviously I'm not entirely too sure what that is, but it's probably important. And I believe they have stake in I believe they have controlling stake in Riot Games, and they actually have quite a bit of Blizzard Activision, not controlling, but they do have their fingers in that pot, which is, it's one of the biggest companies in the world, if I'm to understand some of the news posts and some of the tech journals. Tencent is an incredibly important company when it comes to Chinese tech, and they're investing a framework deal with a local East Chinese government to kind of invest multi-million-dollar deals into building kind of esports stadiums and esports parks, which could be just large land cafes to kind of help the Chinese ecosystem in esports, not necessarily in Overwatch or one specific game, but to kind of help that progress along and continue to just metabolize that out and just blow this whole thing up even far larger. This same effort mirrors a southwestern Chinese city, which Tencent pledged over $580 million over 3 years to create a industrial esports park back in April, which was reported by Mashable, which I'll link down below. But when we look at the kind of history, the infrastructure, the business, the population, China has an incredible population. They're incredibly skilled. When we look at the history, they should be at the top. And I believe it's this kind of young stage of Chinese Overwatch that we just have to kind of crest the hump and, push towards season 2, because I think if a team or if a city like Beijing, and I'm probably going to butcher this name, Guangzhou, if any of these two cities get a Overwatch League slot, which, rumor has it that one of them could possibly be getting a nod for an application, could that help the Chinese scene flourish a little bit more? And I think it can, especially when we look at the kind of Western appeal of what Shanghai kind of represents. I think that they've kind of set themselves up for a kind of underdog story that people just love rooting for, but they probably won't, they're going to carry that narrative of like, oh, they probably won't win, they're probably not very good. But with a fresh start with 2 new cities, or, one of 2 new cities, I think that opens up for a team like LGD or Team CC, which is actually Shanghai's academy team, to kind of step in, add a few new players, add some very strict coaching staff that's hierarchical, and really make a run for it. And I think that's going to bring a lot of people back into the mix for Chinese Overwatch, and you'll see how strong this region can be, because I think that they are probably some of the more creative players that we see come out of esports in general. They're not necessarily too they carry the narrative of like, oh, Chinese aggression, Chinese team fighting, and they're just very aggro. I think is very very narrative driven throughout a lot of esports. But I think that in that same sense, you could kind of take a step back from that same narrative and say that they're just incredibly creative, and they have their own very distinct style that they like to play. And if we look back at what MY showed us, and Miraculous Youngster, for those of you who aren't in depth into Overwatch, it was a team that probably should have been within the Overwatch League, and probably should have been or at least parts of it should have been within the Shanghai Dragons, but unfortunately, due to multiple different circumstances, they weren't. They had to split apart, retire, but now are coming back and not retiring anymore. So we could still see an MY rebirth, maybe in season 3, when some of the rest of the team is come of age. But this was a team that probably should have been Shanghai's representative in the Overwatch League and would have been an incredible marketing force for Chinese fans, because it is a choice of the organization exactly what route they take. But I think China needs to find what lane it wants to take. Does it want to go full Korean? Does it want to go full Chinese and kind of play up to the fans? Because I think either or is going to be very good. But I think if we go full Chinese, if Shanghai or Beijing goes full Chinese, it's going to be much more valuable in the long term, with the same skill sets that could facilitate a possible season 2, season 3 Overwatch League victory. You have an incredible talented team. You have an incredibly talented team in LGD right now. If given the opportunity, if given the right staff, if you fill a certain couple of holes here and there, I think they could be Overwatch League caliber. And I think that there is a new horizon for Chinese Overwatch that we can look forward to. But we do have to kind of take the nod, and we do have to kind of criticize the overall structure that Shanghai has approached, because it has hurt the Chinese Overwatch scene. And I think the reason why we haven't seen China emerge as one of the best regions in the world when it comes to Overwatch has been from the kind of blunder that is the Shanghai Dragons and their possible 0-40 season. So with that said, China is going to be one of the best Overwatch League regions coming into season 2 and season 3. Even in year 4, I think that we're going to see China emerge as one of the best regions. And I think that's their place. I think their place is amongst the top teams and shouldn't be taken lightly. So with that said, if you like the video, please like and subscribe, and follow me on Twitter if you like some of this content. You want to follow my thoughts. Thanks again, and I'll see you guys in the next video.